Hey guys, Kamina the coach here. Is this gonna work? Rude. I'm only gonna do it this way. All right. So we're going live because YouTube doesn't seem to enjoy when I talk about the topics that I'm gonna talk about today, and YouTube takes a long time to upload videos where I talk about this kind of stuff. So welcome back if you're familiar with this channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Kamina the coach. This channel's been around for about 4 years. Originally, it was dedicated to helping people to get it together to work and live abroad. I've been working in education abroad for well over a decade, 9 different countries, currently in Baghdad, Iraq. When COVID came in, I returned to the United States for 2 years and started addressing early childhood trauma and adoption trauma, and kind of redirected the focus of the channel. Now it's a mixed bag. So this particular video, I am going to address some of my old trauma, but particularly we're going to talk about racism, colorism, and privilege, and how it applies to working and living abroad, specifically for Black Americans and people of color. So I am quite obviously a person of color, but I am a light-skinned woman. And so if you look back in my channel, I do have a reaction when the Colin Kaepernick documentary came out. And a lot of people reached out to me and told me they felt like I should watch it. I'm like, I don't really feel like I should watch it because we share a very similar lived experience. And so I think that so just a generalization, I think that in the Black American community, people who haven't lived a similar experience as Colin Kaepernick and myself, there is a very, we want to believe the best of people. We want to believe that it's not really that bad, and that in general, white people don't see us like that, and it's just not that bad. I think for people like Colin Kaepernick and I and other people of color who have been adopted into white families, because they generally kind of pull a wool over their eyes about our true color and our identity, that we get to see a side of white America that most people don't. And so it kind of paints the way that we move through the rest of our lives. I also think our what might be perceived to other Black people as an extreme reaction is probably, to some degree, a shame reaction. So the difference between guilt and shame is, guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am bad. And I think that a lot of us may feel like we are bad because, especially Colin Kaepernick and I, because we are biracial, but we're still Black, and we recognize the prejudice that our brothers and sisters face, and that we don't face at a certain level. Of course, we face prejudice and a lot of microaggressions, but they're wildly different from the ones that our brothers and sisters face. So I think that's why our reactions can be perceived as extreme, versus people who don't have a similar lived experience. For me in particular, I did not even know that I was Black until I was 14. So I lived as a prejudiced Southern white teenager until I found out that I am Black and had to relearn my whole existence. And I think that, and I know that a lot of shame researchers say that a big part of being able to get rid of shame is sharing it, that shame can't exist in the light. So I want to be able to share that with you up front. I do have a lot of shame surrounding the fact that up until about 14, in my mind, I was pretty racist white teenager, because I was raised to believe that my adoptive white parents, racist white parents, were my parents. So, okay. So getting all of that out of the way, I would like to address colorism first. It bothers me a lot when I hear light-skinned Black people complain out in public about the way that we're treated inside of the community and call this colorism. This is not colorism. This is prejudice. It's not colorism. Colorism is directly related to racism and is a systemic thing. Colorism is being chosen because your skin is lighter. being chosen for jobs, primarily for jobs, housing, take your pick. Um, Back in the day when I was young, it was a huge thing with music videos. Um, they choose the light skinned girl with the curly hair, right? So just to start, to get that out of the way, please stop doing that if you're light skinned. That is not colorism, that is prejudice, and you're not benefiting the community by complaining about this kind of stuff. It is true that it happens inside of our community, but this is prejudice and not colorism. And it may hurt your feelings, but it's not hurting your pockets. Sorry, not sorry, to be very blunt like that. Does colorism and racism exist overseas in working environments? Absolutely. Some of the most extreme places that I've seen colorism and racism are China. I have heard some people say that they've been judged on the color of their skin, calling it Obama black. Um, I have been told myself that I am too dark for a position. Um, so a lot of the job positions, I haven't looked in China in a long time, but a lot of positions for jobs in China will say European, but what they really mean is white. Because if you're American, that's great too, but you must be a white American. South African white people are not European, but really what they mean is white. When they say no African, what they mean is no black. And I've seen it be very direct that way. Are there dark skinned black people working in China very happy? Absolutely. I know a girl who lives in China who, or I don't know if she's still there, but she's fluent in Chinese and would choose a Chinese man over a brother any day of the week. No judgment, that's her thing. But are there, and I've actually met several black women who are in China who choose China. That's their thing. Um, can it be very racist in that working environment? Absolutely, especially in the selection process. Can it be? Absolutely. All of that saying in the bubble that I have not worked in an international school, I've only worked in private schools and government schools. Um, Another place that is pretty racist is parts of the Middle East. So while Dubai is a great place to visit, I experienced quite a bit of racism in Dubai. When I would go to drop off my resume in person, the person accepting my resume would ask me flat out where I was from. When I would say that I'm American, they would say, yeah, but originally where? And I almost felt like in the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, I needed to wear my passport around my neck. Because, so when we're talking about privilege, Americans have a huge degree of privilege. And it's not right, but it's kind of nice as a person of color to have some degree of privilege. Having said all of that, in the Middle East, in a lot of Asia, you will find that black men are quite fetishized for all the stereotypes that black men are sought after. I won't go into the grotesque details, but they are quite fetishized, and I'm not mad at it. I would much rather them be sought after romantically or physically than be shot in the streets. Um, in general, it leaves a view of black women as prostitutes. So there have been times where I've tried to go out in Dubai and been refused entry into a club because they suspected that I was a prostitute. When I was living in Saudi Arabia, when I first got there, so I lived a part of my life as a Muslim woman. So before I became Muslim, I would cover out of respect. I thought that it would make life easier. On the contrary, as a woman of color, it made my life quite a bit more difficult. And that's because people assumed that I was African when I was covered. And women would just put their arm in front of me and just push past me. It was a very odd experience. And it was like immediately, as soon as I took my hijab off, I was acknowledged as a Western woman and treated much differently and with much more respect. So there is a degree of privilege that comes with being a Western person. Quite a bit of privilege comes with being a light skinned person. I've had people outright deny that I'm black. Um, I was dating somebody who was Palestinian and had a horrible argument with their family because they insisted that I was not black. I am, but they were going on color of skin. And they're like, "You're delusional, you're not black." My recruiter in China, when I first went to China 2011, was like, "I'm just going to tell people that you're Brazilian." And I hadn't gotten deep enough in my journey to understand that that was a microaggression. So, also, I'd like to add in here before I begin to wrap up. I've done videos before on being aware of what's going on in politics in the United States, not preoccupied, but aware. Why? Because what's going on in the United States will have a large impact on how you're received in other countries as an American. So, um, so I've been overseas for two presidencies, two separate presidencies, three elections, but two different presidencies. And while President Obama was in office, um, I often got told that I look like Michelle, and which I don't. I People would shout Obama when I would ride my bicycle by, and people just assume that we know each other. And um, in general, because he was quite respectful in how he dealt with the world in general, I was received quite well. I did meet somebody from Serbia who does not like him or his policy because he believes that his twin brother was killed in a bombing that Obama ordered. So just depending on what's going on in the politics of the United States can have a lot of impact on how you're going to be received in other countries, and whether that American privilege is going to do you any good or not. When Trump pulled the troops out of Syria and Turkey attacked, I was in Kurdistan, and the attitude of the Kurds towards the Americans changed like that. It was a bit unnerving, to be honest. So just that to be aware of as well. Um, Also, in noticing the difference how people are treated based on their skin color. In big cities in China, in the village, I'm always going to be a novelty. In the village where I worked, or small town where I worked, I was the only foreigner. Not only was I the only black person, I was the only foreigner. And I was the only foreigner that anyone had ever seen there. Not just the only black person, but the only foreigner. So in the big cities, it's less of a novelty to see a foreigner. And because my skin is so light, I don't draw as much attention. However, I did date two black men, one from the Caribbean, one from Africa, um, and one from Togo and one from Grenada. And both taller men, quite a bit darker than me. And it's a very different reaction when we're out than when I'm by myself. People may glance at me while I'm out, but people don't openly stare, not in big cities anyways, openly stare, have lots of commentary. While I was with these guys, I actually had, we were holding hands and a woman came up to him and told him that her friend wanted to sleep with him. It was very odd. Um, both of them were fluent in Chinese, and one time they were commenting on that we must be basketball players and imagine what our kids would look like. We got called devil a lot, black devils a lot. And as far as I can tell, it's in direct relationship to the complexion of skin. And it breaks me. It hurts my heart to see it, to experience it, and to be on the gentler receiving end of it, which is probably also another large reason why I'm so vocal about racism and privilege and all that stuff. So that's kind of all I had to say on the topic. Is it a thing? Yes, it is. Is there anywhere that I have not experienced this? Please just remember, based on the terms of a lighter skinned black woman, different quality of hair. I also can acknowledge a slimmer privilege because I'm not a heavy woman. So there's a privilege that goes along with that. I'm relatively attractive. There's a degree of privilege that goes along with that. And I want to acknowledge all those things before I speak on these places. So southern Mexico, specifically the very impoverished, more impoverished states like Oaxaca and Chiapas, Tabasco, more indigenous population, less money there, and they're also in general quite indigenous themselves and much darker. Not a lot of racism there that I experienced, but again, I have a different experience. I have a friend from the Caribbean who lives in Oaxaca. He's been there for a long time. He likes it very much, but it was a very different experience for him in Chiapas. People would want to come take pictures. And I don't think that they were mean to him, but quite overt in the way that they sought out interactions with him because of his skin color. He's quite dark skinned. There are quite a few African and Caribbean men there that I saw, and that it doesn't seem like they're having a terribly difficult time living there. Now, and just keep in mind, Mexico was colonized, like a lot of North America, colonized by Spaniards, and there are large white populations, largely Spanish populations, where I'm sure that the experience is quite a bit different for people of color. Having said all that, I do know a woman who's Ghanaian, Ghanaian American, and her daughter are in Veracruz and are loving it there. Very embedded in the population. She adores it. She loves it, and I doubt that she will ever leave. So I just wanted to share that because somebody had asked a question in my Facebook group, Americans of Color Teaching Abroad. Feel free to join us there if you're Black American. Overseas jobs for Black Americans if you're not in education. Ask a question about it, and at the end of the day, and kind of how I ended with her was, I feel safer even in China and Saudi Arabia, even here now in Baghdad, than I ever did in the United States. The first thing I did in the United States when I went back during COVID, I'm watching a spider. The first thing I did when I ended up back in the United States during COVID, after buying a car, was buy a gun. I feel safer here in Iraq than I do in the United States. I feel safer, loads safer in China, in Saudi Arabia than I did in the United States. I also feel more appreciated and more seen as a teacher, and I feel like I will be able to live a much more comfortable life that I am deserving of working and living abroad. And I have no intention of returning to the United States ever. So with that, I will go ahead and end here a very long live video. That's why I did a live instead of trying to upload a video. Until next time, my name is Kamina the Coach, sending you so much love, light, peace, and joy. Until next time, again, I'm Camila the coach. Peace.